start with you. What's the biggest cyber risk facing telecom carriers and service providers today, and how is AI changing that threat landscape?
Yeah, so I think that, there's a lot of risk, right, David? Tremendous amount of risk out there today. But I think if you kind of look at what's going on in the landscape, I would say, supply chain and third-party vendor activity within the network is probably the biggest risk that we're facing right now. The expanse of the landscape, when we build out 5G networks, when we're building out enablement to our landline networks, things of that nature. We're putting a lot of equipment out there, a lot of vendor-based equipment that really does expand that threat landscape, right? So there's points of entry for all the cyber criminals to go into, and that really, is not, something that we like to see. So we have to be on top of that, from a network perspective at all times. I think that, as we look at data around this, every year we publish what's called the Data Breach Investigations Report at Verizon, and one of the things that we saw as we talked to the cybersecurity specialists that come in and contribute to that, they're both from the public sector, the private sector, and also government, is that there was a 34% increase in the vulnerabilities around the perimeter networks last year, on a 12-month time frame. So it just speaks volumes to how we have to protect those networks as we go forward. The other piece of that is you have to be building your AI. We talked about the AI perspective. You have to build the AI into the edge network, right? So you build it at the edge and make sure that it's protecting those capabilities. And then also, zero trust is going to be imperative, right? So trust no one, trust nothing, and then verify everything as far as access to the network. Beyond that, I think when you step back and look at, the overall AI landscape and what's happening there, not just the risk at the edge, but everything, you're seeing that there's really a double-edged sword, right? So you've got what's happening from an amplified attack perspective with AI, and then what's happening from a defense perspective. And so the amplified attack perspective, we're seeing things around social engineering, right? We're phishing attacks, and they're so scalable at this point. You're looking at deepfake technology, where they impersonate these videos and things that's, really misleading. And then things around voice cloning or phishing, right, that's happening out there. So that's, definitely something that everyone's looking at as well. And then agentic AI is now coming into play. So you're seeing things happen where these cyber criminals can come in and they can, inject malware once they've infiltrated the network, inject malware that is polymorphic, right? So we start to deploy our countermeasures against an attack, and then that code is out there and it's scanning the network, and it's morphing in real time and going after the third, fourth, and fifth vulnerability within the network. And so you're constantly chasing, that attack AI. So those types of things are happening. The good news is that there's defense AI, right, that's out there. So, when you're talking about real-time threat detections and things of that nature, the ability for us to look at massive amounts of data today, right, and how we can, do so much better than we did with rules-based systems and things like that, and human data analysis and that kind of thing, it's just much better. The other focus there is response and containment. You can do so much more in machine speed from a containment perspective with AI, so that's really great. And then the predictive capabilities of AI, right? That really helps us to go out and look for the patching things that we need to do and the vulnerabilities that are in the network. So it really comes down to AI versus AI, David. This is what's happening. And, it's like a movie theme, so I think that we're all hoping that the defense AI will stay, 3 to 5 steps ahead of what's going on in the attack landscape, though.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Adam, what would you like to add to that?
He really nailed it. The only piece that I would add on to it is that with AI deployed at the edge, the network is susceptible to model poisoning and things that you can do to AI. As he mentioned, there's attack AI, and there's things that you can do to poison the defense system into behaving a certain way. So that's something we need to be able to monitor, observe, and then have policies in place to react to. And identity is still a massive issue. Creating more flexibility in our products and exposing them to more vendors and supply chain people opens the attack surface, and APIs can be abused and scanned at a scale that we haven't seen before. So having defense for that sort of posture is important.
All right, thanks, Adam. Jordan, what's the single most important thing an organization can do to protect itself from the threat of AI, whether used by attackers or as a liability in a cyber claim?
I think, David, you got to have a really robust AI governance framework for your company. Like if you do have an attack, which at this point is more, when you have an attack, not if you have an attack, the carriers, the insurance carriers are going to come and look through like what all compliance protocols you had in place, or inventory all the AIs you're using, how much sensitive data you're putting into that. Are you using open source or closed source AI? I heard yesterday somebody saying that she was willing to bet that in 6 weeks or 6 months, everybody was going to be using open source, which I think from the insurance carrier side, it would definitely disagree with that. They definitely do not want everybody using open source, especially using sensitive data out there. So I think having that framework, having a checklist that goes through all the compliance, all the legal, would be the most important thing you could do.
Okay. Adam, what would you like to add to that?
Those exercises are incredibly important. I get the pleasure of participating in them every quarter and understanding how to react to them. Again, I'm just going to keep going to identity and building in your workforce a suspicion or almost distrust in identity. Things like someone calling in to reset their password, not something you should ever allow without some sort of additional authentication. Obviously, malware and ransomware attacks becoming massive threat that we need to continue to protect against.
All right. So Jordan, how is AI enhancing or degrading a company's overall risk profile in telecom?
I think it goes to that governance framework, depending on how you're using AI. If you're using it for all the good and all the threat detection and all that, it can definitely enhance. If you're a little loose with it, it can certainly degrade. And now underwriters are using some kind of public knowledge AI in the underwriting aspect where they can see to some extent and grade your company on more than just your AI usage, but all of that. And so it really goes back to like baseline stuff, but we've been talking about it for 5 years with having a cybersecurity plan, an incident response plan, all of those things, patching cadence, open ports. You've got to be doing more than just the bare minimum, because at this point compliance, it definitely does not make you secure. So I think AI can certainly help with a lot of those, but if you're not careful with it, it can make you susceptible.
Okay. Bob, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think Jordan's spot on. The only thing I would add there probably is that we go back to the real-time threat detection and the way you can kind of prove out what you're doing with your AI models. When you look at the things that we talked about early on, when it's around social engineering and those types of things. I think that the other thing that we're looking at heavily within Verizon is the self-healing components of the network, right? So when we see network faults and that kind of thing, we want to be able to self-heal, redirect that network traffic in the right direction, make sure we don't have any downtime or any customer impacts from that perspective. And that's something that we're really focused on. I think all the major carriers are focused on that as well. So, but again, I think that helps on the enhancing side. On the degrading side, we're putting new AI models into the landscape, right? So, Adam kind of talked about it with the data poisoning and that kind of thing that's going on. So you really got to be on your toes, right, when it comes to what's happening within the space, and be ready to defend against those types of things. So it's kind of a mixed bag, I would say.
All right, thanks, Bob. So Jordan, when a cyber incident does occur, what best practices help manage the event, mitigate damage, and handle claims effectively?
I think probably similar to what Adam was talking about with, you've got to have ahead of time, you've got to have pre-planned all of this and run through it like, war room style, and know who's on your team, have the contacts readily available for those teams. You've already vetted all your vendor partners with the carrier, because sometimes the insurance carrier can be a little finicky with, you may have internal relationships that you want to use, but the insurance carrier doesn't like that insurance vendor partner. So I think those things need to all be planned out and vetted out ahead of time. And if you have all those, then really a claim can flow very seamlessly. But if you don't, it can be a total nightmare.
Okay. All right. Well, Bob, what would you like to add?
Yeah, so I agree totally with Jordan and what he's saying there. I think, when we look at it from a Verizon business perspective, we're always advocating with our partners that, you should have that incident response plan put together, right? But within that, the context around an advisory council, a retainer service, if you will, is always a smart way to go. And we've been offering our rapid response retainer service for years within Verizon Business, right? So you have a named individual that you can call that understands your platforms, your systems, your network, and when the breach happens, right, you're going to be able to call them, and they're going to be able to give you the 4 and 5 steps to immediately mitigate what's going on and contain that breach. Beyond that, you're going to be working with them to be on site to help with threat analysis and forensics and that type of thing. But most importantly, helping to secure the financial component associated with a breach, and also look at the reputational damage that can be done if you don't have those types of setups with an advisory council.
Okay.
So
I think if I can add in there too, like to go back to Bob's, rapid response and knowing how that works and when it works, because inevitably these never happen, Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's Sunday evening or middle of the night. It's not regular business hours. And so if you're just relying on wait until everybody's up and working for the day, you're going to be way behind and have serious trouble.
All right. Adam, so how are carriers and service providers deploying AI or machine learning in cybersecurity operations today, and what results are emerging?
Yeah, I think there's a few critical areas where you see it essentially everywhere. So the first is binary classification, so scam, spam, things like that. Read a study a few months ago that most carriers are blocking between 600 and 1,000 scam calls every second. And we only expect that to increase with deep fakes and new avenues and offensive attackers using the scale of AI. So being able to deploy products to protect the consumers and help them identify what is potentially a threat is definitely an area that is generally low risk and high customer visibility. There's also, when we're talking about AI at scale, the amount of data is massive.
Right.
So the need to search through that and identify anomalies and identify trends and patterns in the data, there is almost no way to do it. Carriers are dealing with billions of events per day, and building models and training models on your data or fine-tuning models on your data so that it's able to identify relevant threats so that you can take the appropriate action is something incredibly important that a lot of carriers are doing. Another thing that I would mention is for the human operators and the technicians in SOCs and network operation centers, deploying AI tools as sort of a sidecar or a co-pilot that's able to give them information that they need in order to make informed decisions is incredibly important. That's where we've been focused, is really modeling the entire information discovery, issue correlation process as a big decision tree, getting all of the information that we possibly can from the network and from past ticket data and live system data, and giving that human all of the information they need to make the appropriate decision. I think that's where you're seeing it deployed most effectively.
Bob, what would you like to add as far as what the carriers and service providers are doing?
Yeah, I think, something that we're seeing, and working on right now is advanced network analysis, right? And being able to train up the AI model to understand what normal behavior is, right? When we see that the traffic analysis coming across the network. And then when there's deviation, obviously, from that perspective, then the AI will respond and, work to contain whatever they see. Working with the NetOps teams and the SecOps teams to make all that stuff happen. I think that, as you look at, deploying this and looking at, the machine learning capabilities that we have out there, there's a lot of advancement that we're looking at. We're really excited about that. I think it's going to help out tremendously as we move forward.
All right. So Adam, what are the biggest barriers to adopting AI-driven detection, data quality, integration, trust, or talent?
Yeah, I don't see any of the panelists from the last panel in the room. My answer might surprise people. I think for years it's been data and the quality of the data. I actually think it's the least important, and I'm going to explain why. So first, I would say talent is incredibly important in that the landscape is changing so rapidly and so quickly, and new emergent discoveries are being made almost daily, that this interplay between offense and defense and customer expectation is changing as we're talking. And having the right talent to build the products that you need to secure your network or to ensure that your revenue stream, your products are scalable is incredibly important. I've spent probably 10 to 15 hours a week for the last year reading people's papers and then begging them to come work for me. It's the talent search and identifying the people that are going to create products at scale, which is, I think, the most important. And then after that, integration. There's so many systems, and it's generally a moving target. Getting access to the data in front of people that are able to make informed decisions and that can help connect and ground your product to the customer is important. I think almost everybody has some sort of new software acquisition or new integration that needs to happen. Obviously, we talked earlier, Bob mentioned that opening up more connections to vendor supply chains obviously increases the attack surface. So that is incredibly important, where if you don't integrate your AI models and your tool sets into the OSS that your entire team is using, they're not effective. And then I would say the trust is there. At the end of the day, AI is just, this is the dirty little secret, it's just probability, statistics, linear algebra, and a little bit of calculus, and that's it. It's just math. And so at the end of the day, if leadership at the company doesn't trust the decisions that the AI is making, you're not going to get buy-in, you're not going to get the velocity that you need in order to prove effectiveness. And then finally, data quality. There was a study that was published a few weeks ago that there's only 28% of enterprises that are actually even labeling their data when these types of human events are happening. So when a breach or something like that happens, enterprises aren't even going back and labeling and identifying that and trying to learn from it. I think that's a key thing that we need to continue to push people to do. But ultimately, if you focus just on the data, you'll have a well-manicured label of or pile of data to sell when your company goes under.
So specifically in the question around the biggest barriers to adopting AI-driven detection, you say that data quality used to be the, because I was with that last panel.
Sure.
So where are you saying it is today?
I think it's talent.
And talent's number one?
Yeah.
Where's data quality?
I think it's the least important of those four things.
Okay.
Still incredibly important, but might be a controversial take.
Jordan.
I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. That is a little outside of my wheelhouse. I would say from the insurance carrier side, it would be more the integration piece would be the bigger barrier. Just, kind of what, like I said, matching up those vendor relationships. But, Adam kind of spoke much more in depth than I can on that topic.
Okay. I guess before we go to the next question, I just want to pause for a second. So this is part of the tech track for INCOMPAS. The board had designated an advisory committee that I've had the pleasure of helping chair for the past couple of years. On our committee, Ben Edmond from Connect Base, who was on the last panel, and Kyle Hildebrand from Vivacity Group, who was on the panel before, along with Vicky Schauer from Brightspeed and Misty Snyder from Verizon. And I guess the thing I just want to encourage people is if you have topics you would like us to bring to the forefront, I'd love to hear about it. If you got feedback on different things. I mean, one of our goals that we're trying to do is increase the technical participation in INCOMPAS without really moving away from the DNA of INCOMPAS. So what sort of technical topics fit into quote unquote co-opetition, like the last topic probably did, as well as regulatory and policy. But again, or if there's some other technical issue you think really needs to fit. Obviously this morning we talked about hyperscalers, and there was a lot of interest in that topic. Our goal is to have a technical webinar every quarter, Q1, Q2, Q3, and then have 3 panels at the show in Nashville next year. We look at your feedback. If you've got other ideas on how towards membership or events, the advisory committee would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you to see what we can do there. So, Bob, how is AI changing collaboration between network operations and security operations teams? And are we seeing convergence or new silos?
Yeah, so I think we are seeing convergence, right? And it's a great thing. There's been a lot of autonomy between the net ops team and the SecOps teams, although they have to collaborate, obviously, in the past we've seen that. The net ops teams have been focused more on network performance, when it comes to latency, throughput, and overall uptime. The SecOps team, obviously looking at, threat log analysis, coming off SIMs, things like that. Threat detections, threat intel coming in, and then also doing mitigation type activities. I think the AI is now bringing together this massive collaboration where we have the ability for both sides to actually have bird's eye view into what's happening. So if there's something on the SecOps side that is alerted immediately, the NetOps side sees what's happening. If the AI determines that it's going to reroute traffic because of what's seen on the SecOps side, the NetOps side sees that, right? If they have any concerns, they can immediately reach back over to the SecOps side. So it's fantastic how that's happening. The risk, right, that we're going to see with that is the data for AI, and I think, Adam, you said it earlier, the AI model is only as good as the data you feed it, right? So if you're building out silos on either side of that fence and you're not feeding that back into the converged model, you're going to set yourself up for false positives, false negatives, things of that nature, and you're really not going to get the output that you're looking for. So it comes back to what Jordan was talking about with governance. Who has the responsibilities on both sides to look at what data is coming in, and then who has the ultimate responsibility for understanding how the integrity of that data is going to be maintained.
All right. Adam, what would you like to add to that?
I think Bob covered almost everything.
Took all your bullets away, huh? How horrible he did that.
He got everything. The general idea is that the NetOps team is concerned with, is it broken? And the SecOps team is maybe concerned about, is it under attack? And sometimes it's broken because it's under attack. So they are at a point where they can leverage the same tools as Bob was mentioning, same automation pipelines, maybe even the same playbooks if your policy is well integrated. But I still think there's a divide between, is it working and is it under attack? So ultimately that decision of, do they become one converged team, or does it make sense to keep them separate? That hasn't been answered yet, but certainly as Bob mentioned, the tools that are available, the AI-powered tools that are available for the SecOps team helps the NetOps team and vice versa.
All right. So Adam, we'll let you kick this one off. What is a healthy balance between automation and human oversight look like in telecom security? And how much decision-making can safely be delegated to AI?
That's a great question. I think if everyone's executive team is anything like mine, it's why can't the machines do everything until something bad happens, and then it's why did you let the machines do everything, right? So the framework that governs that is ultimately a few things. It's actually fairly simple, is trying to identify the tasks that you can safely offload to AI-based systems. First of all, can you reverse it? Right, so ultimately deploying something that is incredibly difficult to crawl back is almost never something that you want to be triggered by an automated action. Also, is it contained? Meaning, is this change something that impacts a single host or a single node, or is this something that impacts your global network, right? Understanding that blast radius and the scope of the change that you're making, incredibly important. So small containment area, reversible change, generally something that's a candidate for AI-powered decision-making. And then the human element comes in, and really it's assume you're standing in front of your leadership and you need to explain why you implemented this change. Do you, one, have the reasoning where you can explain the data lineage and the tractability of why we thought that this was a decision that AI could make? And then hot on the heels of that, do you have the observability system in place where you can identify everything that happened, all of the traces that happened in order for the model to make that decision? And can you explain why that decision was made? And if you can say yes to all of those questions, then it's absolutely something that you should offload to AI decision making. There are some advancements. What I tell my team every day is evals. We have to be evaluating everything that we're doing. There have been advances in LLM as a judge or AI as a judge where we're basically, and it gets scary, but we're using AI to grade AI actions that it was taken. And you get, it's the only thing that works at scale. And then building in some sort of, which is the second part of the question, but building in some sort of human in the loop where if it doesn't qualify for that framework of, reversible, contained, and explainable, then can you do a lot of the pre-processing for the human that needs to make the decision? So that might be, maybe a tier 1 decision is offloaded to AI, a tier 2 decision, AI does the majority of the research and then provides the recommendation to the human and says, here's what we detected based on this information, here's all the observability and all of the traces. We're recommending taking this action, should we do it, yes or no? And then finally, the last tier 2 decision is maybe something where the AI can actually trigger a human. Something is going on here, we're not quite sure, you need to take a look at it.
To go along with that, AI definitely can be more effective on some decision making. From a claims perspective, I was reading a stat from one of our carriers the other day that AI phishing attempts have a success rate of like 52 to 54%, whereas traditional phishing is like 12%. So the computer is definitely better at it than the human element.
Right.
And then from our side, we still, 95% of all cyber claims develop from human error. So, it's telling us that we need to delegate a little bit more decision making to AI, but we have to find that happy medium and that healthy balance.
All right, we're getting down the last 5 minutes, and if somebody's got a question or comment, we want that. But I'd like to share a book with everybody. When it comes to just leading your teams in this AI world, there is a book out there with the title, The AI-Driven Leader. It's by a gentleman named Jeff Woods, and that's spelled Geoff, Jeff Woods. And it is a great leadership book, and it is AI all the way through. I mean, the key message is AI belongs in the passenger seat. You're in the driver's seat with the steering wheel. And how does AI help me? So if you have not yet read The AI-Driven Leader, I recommend you get it. I mean, when I went through the book, I said, well, I've been doing this stuff, but he does it so much better. And so I would encourage you to read or listen to that book. Okay, any questions from the floor first? All right. Bob, last question, I guess, is how should telecom leaders measure ROI or value when investing in AI-based cybersecurity systems?
Yeah, so I think, when you think about it, it's not nearly as linear, right, as some of the things we do from a product development perspective when we're building out new products or when we're looking to purchase new systems, whether it's CRMs or things like that. You can always kind of tie those things back to sales volume, revenue attainment, those types of things. I think when you're looking at AI investment, you're going to be looking at cost avoidance mainly. You're taking a look at things like the number of threats that are being avoided, the type of threats that you're avoiding, and then somehow you're tying back a dollar figure, a dollar amount financially to that, so that you can present that in an ROI fashion. The other piece that's probably even more prevalent is breach activity. How much breach activity did we see or did we contain prior to the AI? And then how much breach activity did we contain, post the AI? And you tie that back and you put the financial metrics to that as well. The other thing is a little more abstract, I think, is some of the traditional models that we look at within telecom around customer churn, and how do you tie that back as far as your cybersecurity threats and what's happened there. Making those correlations to say our churn went down this much because we were more diligent with our cybersecurity. And then also looking at things, and we looked at this heavily at at Verizon for sure, the Net Promoter Score. Customer satisfaction. How much are we satisfying our customers because of the implementation of the cybersecurity tools and things that we're putting in from an AI perspective?
Okay. Jordan?
Yeah, I think Bob nailed it. I think from trying to quantify some of it from my lens would be, the average claim keeps going up and up and up. The average demand keeps going up and up and up. And so if you can lower your risk to, I think, as of last week, I think that it's now like 1.5 million is the average ransom demand. So you can kind of quantify it that way. And then also, insurance premium. If you're above average or excellent, superior, compared to your peers, you can drive down your insurance cost. So I think there's some ROI that way, would be how I would look at some of that ROI, quantifying it.
All right, thanks. Adam, you got anything you want to pile onto that question before we go?
No.
You good?
Good.
Last chance for any questions, comments? How about it? Thanks to our panel. Thank you, Adam, Bob, Jordan.